Hello and welcome to another edition of Here's the Pitch, sponsored by Masters Restaurants. 5 locations in St. Louis, stlmasters.com. My favorite restaurant because they're the title sponsor. Go to their website, stlmasters.com. Look at that website, get directions, look at their menus. You'll love the food there. Today, I'm going to be posting this interview I did with Jackie the Joke Man Martling. I did it a little bit into COVID, but I think people enjoyed it, and I've edited it up a little bit. And so now let's just get right to it. Jackie, hello.
Oh, how the hell are you?
I'm just tickled pink to talk to one of the members of the Beatles, of radio at least. That's what you...
The last time I was in St. Louis, we were between shows, and, normally I'd be able to tell you who the hell I was with. I don't know who I was with. But me and the other comic walked out of the Funny Bone, and it was in some kind of plaza, and across the plaza was a theater, and it was Jay Leno, Larry Miller, and oh God, what was the Russian guy's name?
Yakov Smirnoff.
Yeah, and Yakov Smirnoff, Larry Miller, and Jay Leno. Jay, hey, how you guys doing? You working at Club Beer? In 1984 or something like that. So that's a long time ago.
In Russia, the hockey puck shoots you.
God, Jesus.
So we fixed our audio issues. So unfortunately, we're going to have to do this over the phone. But Jackie, once again, thanks for joining. How are you spending quarantine time? What's going on with Jackie, and where are you?
Well, my girlfriend and I are having a very, very bad case of survivor's remorse because we lived here right on Long Island Sound in a, not obnoxious house, but a really nice house, an old house, looking out over the water with our garden and our kitties and, my garage office and all my memorabilia. And, we're doing this Cameo.com, a bunch of them every day, and doing millions and millions of podcasts and interviews. And it's, it's like a huge vacation. I mean, we're getting ready to strangle each other because you don't see anybody else hardly. But, we got food and we got a beautiful place and a nice place. We're up in the middle of we're on the North Shore of Long Island in the middle of, the place where time forgot, so we can walk and walk and walk along the bay or through Center Island, and it's all scenic and beautiful, and it's wonderful. So we're living the life, but we're watching the world crash down and fall apart around us, which is, so you can't really, smile and dance, so it's kind of mixed emotions,
Well, maybe
and I just hate everything that's going on,
Maybe me and you today can make people laugh for a little bit. That's my hope.
Yeah, I still, I record jokes and send them to my friends on the front lines. I record filthy jokes and send them, and the doctors and the nurses, they love that. It's a little bit of a release here and there. You'd think it would be like, obnoxious to try and make them laugh, but it isn't. It's like it's 20 seconds of return to normalcy, if that makes any sense.
And I love your Twitter account. You just send jokes out all day. So if anybody's feeling bad, go to Jackie Martling, Jackie the Joke Man Martling, and take a look. You're always sending out jokes.
My Twitter is at Jackie Martling, and I actually only tweet one joke a day, sometimes more. But if you go there, you can see all the old ones because it's at 4:20 every single day. And I've been doing it for, my God, I don't even know how long. Could it be 10 years?
Twitter's been around that long, yeah. Well, you started, that's basically obviously how you started, was a stand-up and doing the jokes. How did you form that style of boom, 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 joke, 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 joke? When did that become your style, and how did you decide that would be your style?
Well, I didn't decide anything. I just, ever since I was a kid, I got an autobiography out called The Joke Man, About a Stern, and it really goes into it, and people have, it's fascinating because it's not. It's really one foot in front of the other. But when I was a little kid, I just, I'm a smart guy, and I just absorbed every joke I ever heard And I just figured everybody in the world knew all the same jokes. And I just kept them and kept them when I was a musician through high school and in college. And then for the entire 70s, we played in a band here on Long Island. Me and another guy telling jokes and playing original songs. You know, Howard used to play them on the show and make fun of us. But, you know, people loved us. And when we broke up at the end of the 70s, I already knew every joke there was. And I thought the whole world did. But turns out nobody knows the jokes, and least of all the comedians. And I said, you know what the hell, I'm going to give this a shot. And I'd already been telling jokes on stage with my songs, but it was kind of subtle because I'd tell jokes and play the guitar. And I say my starting point in comedy was 1979, and it was subtle. I went from a guy who played the guitar and told jokes to being a guy who told jokes and played the guitar, which sounds ridiculous, but, you know, the thrust of the act became jokes. I mean, I still remember in January of 79, the first time I got paid for telling jokes with my guitar on as opposed to the opposite. And I just knew every joke in the world. And when I first started, you know, there was bad raps going around. Oh, some guy on Long Island, you know, he must have picked up a joke book and decided to tell the jokes on stage, which was absolutely wrong. I mean, I was organically, every cell in my body had absorbed these jokes for 30 years. I was 31 years old before I started in comedy. And then one by one, as these guys met me, like, holy fuck, that guy's the funniest guy we ever met, you know. And I never looked back. You know, I made an album, then I made another album, and everybody, you know, laughed their asses off. They're just stupid old jokes. I write some of them. But I take what they are and I make them work and I pare them down. There's more of a science to it that, you know, to make it look like you're just fooling around and telling one thing after another off the top of your head takes a lot of work. You know, it sounds silly, but it does, you know. And and then I used to send my albums to everybody because if you're a joke teller, you just want to share this stuff. It's not even explainable. But my album came out, and I just would send them around because I didn't know where I was going, what I was going to do. I didn't have any plans. You know, I couldn't really go on Johnny Carson because I'm telling old jokes. But all I knew was I was killing every audience. And then at some point I heard about the guy moving to New York City from Washington, D.C., so we sent my 3 albums to Howard Stern, care of WNBC. I never heard of the guy. And he called up and said, hey, your albums are great. You know every joke. Why don't you come in and hang out today? And I went in and hung out on the show, and at the end of the day, they said, wow, you're a lot of fun. Come back next week. So I went back once a week for 3 years for free. And in that time, I slowly but surely was feeding them jokes and ideas and lines, and I integrated myself into the whole thing. And then he got fired and rehired, and when we went to mornings, you know, I became head writer, and we went to Pluto. You know, and people are like, wow, you're lucky. You hooked up with him just before his big ride to stardom. And I said, no, I didn't just happen to hook up with him. I happened to have a lot to fucking do with the fact that we went to the moon. But, you know, that's all up to, you know, there's horse races. You know, was it the Yankees or was it Casey Stengel? Who knows? You know what I mean?
But you did see that,
right? I'm sure you have no idea who Casey Stengel is.
Oh, Mets manager, 1962. Yeah, of course I know the Casey's. But yeah, you did. It's crazy. You just said that, though. It's true because it doesn't. The show doesn't rise, or Howard doesn't rise without you, without Fred, without Robin, without Baba Booey. I mean, that's the 5 that I think of. You know, that kind of basically got that show kind of rolling into the late 80s, early 90s, and then by the late 90s, he's got a movie and a book, and he's on E! Every night. I mean, what was it like just kind of sitting in that chair and feeling this momentum of this show it's not a radio show. This is something else.
It's like there's a fish know it's in water. I distinctly remember. Well, I used to brag to people. A lot of times, a lot of interviews I really loved, and I would always say the same thing, but it's really kind of sad because I'm the guy who fucked it up. But every interview, I'd say, you know, this morning, I just worked with Howard and Robin and Fred. And the first day walked onto that show in 1983. It was me and Howard and Robin and Fred. And it was the four of us the entire time. And I remember by the end, I was like, we've been together for, 18 years, no marriage, rock and roll bands except for the Rolling Stones, no marriage, no TV show. Nobody lasts 18 years. And I say, this morning I worked with the same people I worked with in 1983, but then, of course, I left the show, so it fucked up that whole thing. But I'd get interviewed, like in 1988, and they'd say, man, you guys are just the greatest, but it's been 2 years. But how long can it last? I don't know. And then, a couple of years later, wow, you guys are the greatest, but it's been 5 years. How long can you guys last? I don't know. And I said, Howard just keeps reinventing himself. All right, you guys been together 10 years. Well, next thing you know, there was a TV show, and then there was the E show, and then there was the movie, then there was the books, then there was the movie, and just, it just end over end, and we just got crazy and crazy to where we hardly did any more bits because just sitting around, it was just brutally funny. Everybody had each other's buttons, and it couldn't have been more fun. It absolutely could not have been more fun. When I left, it wasn't because I didn't love doing every second of the show, but it takes a toll, getting up at 4:30 every morning and living the life that I lived, But I don't think we were fully aware. There were milestones along the way. I remember I got called to do a charity show, and my wife and I went down to New Orleans, and we had just started the E television show. So everybody, they all heard us, but finally they're getting to see what we look like. And my wife and I were in New Orleans, sitting at a wrought iron table upstairs to order lunch, and the waiter came over and nonchalantly said, "Hi, Jackie. Hi, Nancy." He not only knew me, he knew my wife. That's how wide the show had gone. And I was like, wait a minute, we're not in Bayville. We're in fucking New Orleans. And that was one of those, spots along the way where the dawn went off in your head like, holy shit, what do we got going here, And it got so crazy. Like I'd be in traffic on the way home on a summer afternoon, and it'd be construction. I'd be sitting there in the car, and like the guy in the next car over would be stuck in traffic, and they wouldn't say, "Are you Jackie Martling, or are you the guy from the Stern Show?" A guy would look over and just nonchalantly say, "So what'd she look like?" She was a pig. He made it sound like she looked good, but she wasn't too pretty. They would just talk to me like a matter of course, like he'd been with me for the last couple of hours, which was, it made New York a very, very small town, which was really cool,
Yeah, what you mentioned there, I was going to kind of get to this later, but leaving the show, you left it in 2001. You said it was like that schedule, the morning. Just tell me a little bit about making that decision. I know you had a lot of contract.
No,
there's a lot of negotiations.
It's like anything. There was a million things piled on top of each other, and I drew a line in the sand. And it's funny because the bullshit. Because a couple of months later, I actually went back and said, "Look, I'd love to come back for the deal." Because I didn't realize how much I was going to miss sitting around and laughing so hard. You don't miss the fame or the money. It was just like, wow, you just don't have that much fun anywhere else. But I was drinking too much, and my wife and I were on the outs for years, but there was no way I was going to quit drinking. There was no way I was going to split up with my wife because I couldn't go looking for a place to live because I was working, 25 hours a day, writing the TV shows and doing the radio show and going out and doing stand-up and releasing CDs. And then I go away for a weekend to Las Vegas or Chicago to work, and they pay me so much money. And then when I finally would have a weekend off, the last thing I was going to do was go shopping for an apartment. So I was kind of stuck in no man's land, and there was no way I was going to quit drinking. And I said, you know what, I'm going to ask for a certain amount of money, and if they pay it, I'll stay, and if they don't, I'm going to get my life back, which sounds crazy. I was making a lot of money, but not relative to, I mean, we were printing money. You know, K-Rock was printing money. It was zillions and zillions of dollars. I was like, you know what? I've been here since the beginning. Nobody else wants to ask, but the hell with them. You know, cut me in. You know, and they didn't even want to talk. So that was that. You know, to this day, people say, "Oh, it's the worst decision anybody ever made, ever." Blah blah blah. And yesterday, I celebrated, well, whatever you call it, 19 years sober. And, you know, you never know. Like, I put my jokes on Twitter, and, like, you know, 10 people will like the joke or 20 people will like the joke. I know a lot more people read it, but nobody. And yesterday I said, oh, by the way, I've been sober for 19 years. And, like, you know, 1,300 people liked it and responded. And, you know, there's insults here and there. But, you know, it's just crazy. It just, what happened had to happen. It really did. You know, people are like, why didn't you stay 5 years? You know, I might have wound up dead. You know, I might have ran my car into a pole. Who knows? You know, so you just got to go with your gut and do what you do. You know.
Yeah.
You know
how hard? But
you know, I never claimed to be smart.
But how hard? How hard was that year though when they're doing the Win Jackie's Money and Howard is just saying no, he's not coming back, and you did ask to come back, and you know now you're like, oh my God, what did I do? How hard was that year?
No, listen. When I said I'd love to, I knew that ship had sailed. I knew there was no way they were taking me back, but I knew I should ask. But listen, you got to be ready to walk away when you're negotiating. You know, it was Sophie's choice. You know, it was fine. You know, it really was fine. You know, I mean, I didn't listen. I didn't care. You know, it's like, you know, but I also realized I had to quit drinking because, well, I couldn't get divorced while I was on the show because they would have dragged that in front of the whole listeners, and that would have been unfair to me and my wife and my family. And there was no way I was going to quit drinking if I was still on the show. But when I got off, I realized, holy Christ, I got way too much free time. And I said, I can't spend the rest of my life waiting for it to be 5 o'clock so I can start drinking. I said, the only way to do this is to have it never be 5 o'clock. So I just quit drinking, and I moved into a house by myself, and was divorced. I had no job, and it was very rocky, you know, but I weathered it. It was great. I got so many friends that I never had a beer with in my life. You know, it's so crazy. But by the grace of God, I wound up with a house I've been staring at my entire life here in Bayville. And so now, you know, I got the greatest house in the world and the greatest girl in the world. And, you know, it's funny, they're doing a documentary. I'm in it, and it's finished. But there's nothing to do with it. You know, we don't want to just put it on, you know, some cable channel. We want to take it around to the film festivals and have some fun and do some Q&A and let people ask the questions about the Stern Show they always wanted to know, you know. But it's interesting. I got to write my autobiography, and people ate that up. So, you know, you just move along the way you move along. That's all, one foot in front of the other.
You mentioned that your divorce. So there's some great memories from the show, but one of the great ones, I mean, so Howard gets divorced. That's not great, obviously, but the movie came out, and he's, you know, walking with Allison down the red carpets, and then a couple years later, you know, it's not working out. What was that time like? And then specifically, you guys did a roast. I remember it, and the separation roast, and no one wanted to tell jokes, but it was hilarious. Howard's like, all right, we'll do this, and then you guys get out there and start doing. What was that divorce time like, being around Howard, and just what happened? It's just so very funny. Weird.
You know what? It's a shame that we're not on video because, you know, so I've saved a bunch of notes from over the years. One of the notes I had, I mean, I wrote a zillion notes every day, and I still have all the notes, but the one note I had pinned over my desk, because I thought it told the entire tale of the entire show, and the note was, one of the templates I created was, if you're just tuning in, and I'd say what's going on in the studio. It was always funny. And so, if you're just tuning in, we're giving a breathalyzer test to a midget in a pink Easter Bunny outfit. That was when Henry Dwarf was dressed as the Easter Bunny, and he was drunk out of his mind. But when Howard got divorced, it was, nobody had any inkling. Nobody had the faintest fucking idea. And there was only one thing that happened, but I would have never picked up on it at the time. It was really funny because me and Howard and Fred were, during a commercial break, and Gary came in, and, we'd always chat. And Gary said, Howard, I just read today they say that 1 out of every 5 people gets divorced. That means somebody in this group's going to get divorced. Who do you think's going to get divorced first? And Howard said, I know. Oh, you know. And I thought that he was like being pompous, like he was so sure I was going to get divorced, or he was so sure Fred was going to get divorced. But in retrospect, he was talking about himself because they were already going to counseling and everything. But they announced it on a Friday. And I was in Atlantic City doing the film festival for Potluck, one of the first movies I was ever in. And I was sitting at the bar, and I had on a baseball hat, and I had my head down low because, you don't want anybody to know who the hell you are. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, I'll never forget this, on Fox News, up behind the bar, all of a sudden there's this big thing, Howard Stern and wife to separate. I'm like, knocked me over with a spoon, and thank God nobody knew who I was because they all would have said, how'd you guys keep that a secret? And I love you too. And meanwhile, like, who would believe that we had no idea? But they broke it on a Friday afternoon, so the people absorbed it for a weekend. And when we came in on Monday, I still have this note, like, it's right down at the bottom of the stairs here. I could have held it up and showed you. In fact, I'll take a picture of it and I'll send it to you. When the microphones came on Monday morning, the whole world was tuned in to see what the hell is he going to say about what happened, and of course I'm writing notes, and I wrote a note and put it in front of him, and when the microphones went on, the first thing he said was, "All broads, please call."
I remember that.
And what was great about it, it was on, it made the AP. It was in every, every article. There was a million. Hold on, let me take this picture.
Jackie looking for a picture right now, so we'll let him do that.
Every article in the newspapers and magazines, it was a funny opening line, so it was in a lot of them. But it was odd, and then we actually went on a couple dates with him and his girlfriend, and it was odd. I really liked Allison. She's a sweet woman, and but marriage is tough, especially the Stern Show made it tough. It really did.
Yeah. Did you? So I have a few. That's one of my favorites. Do you have I'm sure this is such a hokey podcast question, but a favorite moment, like, man, that was the day or do they all just kind of run together? What do you have something that comes to mind when you think of it?
There are a million of them, but making the movie was incredible. But there was, sitting there in the studio before we moved to the bigger studio, I was sitting there literally, my right knee was against James Taylor's left knee, and he sat there and he played 4 songs. And I said, you know what, I'm closer to him than anybody would have ever been, because there's no reason for anybody to ever sit this close to him when he's playing music. He sang Caroline on My Mind and Sweet Baby James. I was like, I'm sure I had an orgasm, But there was so many classic moments. We were sitting there one morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. Sam Kinison and Pat McCormick and Chuck McCann and Jack, somebody from the old Newhart show, just came bursting. It had been late at night, and Sam had said, "Come on, guys, let's get in my plane and go do the Stern Show." And they flew from California, and they just came walking in at 6 o'clock in the morning. I was like, holy Jesus Christ, it's shit like that. Like like Joe Walsh would walk in naked except for his bathrobe. I mean, you could just go on and on and on with it, I mean, we walked out during commercial break, and Milton Berle turned to everybody and said, he just talked about my cock for 45 minutes. What? I could go on and on and on. There is, how can you pick a favorite moment? You know what I mean?
Well, and then the semantics of the show, I always was like, all right, what are they doing? Because Howard let everything, you'd hear if Fred dropped a tape, the show would stop, or a cart. But what goes on in the breaks? I mean, it seems like, I don't want to say it's scripted, but he knows where he wants to go. But tell me about just the semantics of that show when you were there. It was always, I know.
What happened was, when I started on there, I'm a fun guy. And if I'm sitting around with a couple people, I contribute. I yak, and I'm funny, But it was not my radio show. So I'd sit there and I'd think of an idea or think of something funny, but it wasn't my place to say anything. So I would write something down. It was funny. When I first went in there, and they said, come back next week, I came in with a couple of ideas there was a black helicopter traffic reporter, and I, had some lines for him, and when I first handed them to Howard, he looked at me like, almost like, what are you doing? I don't need any help. And then during the week, I heard him say them, because when I very first started on the show, that was probably the last time I ever listened to the show, was when the first week I was on, 2 weeks I was on. And all of a sudden I heard him using the lines I gave him. And then the next week I walked in, he said, hey man, you got anything else? And I was like, yeah. So so he got hooked. And then slowly but surely I'd give him ideas over the 3 years. And then when we went to K-Rock, he got fired and they got hired to K-Rock. They actually had a little place for me to sit where I could physically put the stuff in front of him. And then we went to mornings. And so I just would, physically write the notes with a Sharpie on an 8x10 piece of paper and put it in front of him.
So that was my chat with Jackie the Joke Man Martling from the Howard Stern Show, and it was so much fun getting a chance to catch up with him. And, of course, technology can be kind of rough, and there was way more to that interview, and unfortunately it ended up on the cutting room floor. I don't know what happened, but the equipment crashed in the middle of the interview. But at least we got a good half hour out of it. There was some more fun stuff in there, and maybe Jackie will come back and we'll talk some more about some of that stuff. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully you're enjoying Massa's restaurants even during the pandemic. 5 locations in St. Louis. They're doing curbside pickup, online ordering, and if you go to their menu, stlmasses.com, you can see the menus, you can order that food, you can see their hours. They've adjusted their hours a little bit, but it's still the same great food. The Big Al specials right there. Cajun pasta, getting some myself this weekend. Can't wait. So make sure you support my title sponsor, especially now when restaurants need it. Go out and support all the restaurants. They need it. We need to get back to normal, and let's hope we can, as one, kill the coronavirus. So thanks to Jackie, thanks to you for listening, and I'll catch you next time.